Thank you for coming and welcome to Rondaxe Pharma's proprietary new software called SimpliDATA, which is a tech transfer tool that's going to help simplify and really create ease in tech transfer. And over the several last years, we've noticed that that's a topic of critical importance. Tech transfer and the buzz around it has merit for discussion, because there's really no easy, clean, or efficient way to accomplish it without a ton of manual effort and resources and time spent. So when we dive into it, Rondaxe at its core is a CMC consultancy. We have vast experience in helping both small and large biotech and pharma companies in all aspects of drug development. And what we see when we get hired to go into companies for tech transfer issues are the effort, the problems, the delays, the errors, and the deviations that surround it. And so we're brought in, problems have already surfaced. There's a loss of data, there's improper versioning, there's repeated work, there's misinformation. And that results in deviations and errors, either human or otherwise, that our consultants working around the clock. And we noticed also it's a bigger issue than just from what we've discovered. This is an Allotrope Foundation statistic that states the amount of time knowledge workers waste hunting for data, finding and correcting errors, and searching for sources for data they don't trust is 50% of the time. We've seen it at Rondaxe because we're hired on a consistent and constant level to go in these companies and help them with tech transfer. We know it can be a huge waste of time to do this manually. And that's why we've developed SimpliDATA. So we'll dive into a case study here to make this kind of relevant to something you can recognize. A large client purchased a product from a biotech company. Sounds familiar. The process got off to a great start. 4 batches of the API were made worth millions of dollars. During the initial process transfer, critical parameters were not clearly communicated and par ranges were assumed at 10%. During the campaign, there were multiple batch failures. The root cause of the failure was traced back to excursions beyond the par. The parties involved did not communicate ranges due to inaccurate transcription, and this can easily be avoided with SimpliDATA. So before we dive in, just a bit more background here. So throughout the years, Rondaxe has partnered with software developers to create innovative digital solutions. And what we've created here is a platform that, with the help of a handful of the top 30 pharma and biotech companies that are our clients, we've solved major issues associated with tech transfer with 3 things: structure, organization, and automation. And so we'll dive into the program and take a look at this. But what I want you to realize with the program is you'll see things you recognize, how we developed the recipe off of an EBR, an electronic batch record. And then you'll see things that you recognize that'll be manual that are automated so that all the data is captured properly. So with that being said, let's dive right into the program. And we're in the software now. And it's a web-based application with simple login and password requirements, and it'll bring you to this process page where you can choose your project. So we'll choose that as Anavir. Now, before we get started with this, I want everybody to know that this is not proprietary data. Atazanavir is a very old drug, and all the data that I'm going to show you here is public. So what we see here is the first logical step of the tech transfer tool, and that's the recipe. It's really modeled after an EBR, or at least the EBRs that Rondaxe has received. And what it shows here is basically all the lines of the recipe that you need for a successful tech transfer. And it's easy to bring data over by importing it. If you want to cut and paste or copy and paste certain sections, you can bring that over as well. Or you can do what I'm about to do right here, and that's add a customizable line. So let's just pick any line here in the recipe. We'll click on it. We'll hit the plus button. We're going to add a row below. And what that does is it brings up a list of actions, and that's the first step, right? So let's pick a very common reagent, and we'll talk about HCl. So first we want to charge it. So we do that. The material I said is going to be HCl. Now, with the pull down tabs and all of the database materials that we have, there are 3 ways that we can do this. One is we can cycle through this and pick the exact material that we want. The second thing is that we can type HCl in here because we know we want it, and it gives us a load of options. Let's just choose the 30%. Again, not real numbers. Or we can really take a look at the libraries and materials that we have here if we really want to get specific or look at more thorough version of the material here. And you can also import materials if you have your own proprietary materials that you need to add to the library. So once we have that, we'll go with the quantity. Again, completely making up numbers here. The unit, we're going to stick to ml. The equipment, since we have the 3-liter round bottom, we're going to stick with that. And there you have it as far as the pull down tabs of the situation that you need to adhere to. And really, before we get onto the parameters, we have the quantity, we have the units, we have the equipment, and we can keep track of it. What's great about this is that once you add the line here, it transfers over to all of the automated charts and data tables that you have here. Again, for successful, succinct tech transfer. And so we'll get into the parameters now. Well, why? Why are the parameters important when we choose them? Well, maybe the electronic batch record specifies a certain temperature. Maybe the rate's important. There could be a litany of things that, quite frankly, are generally missed in transferring data to a batch record. It's easy to miss something like a single parameter in a batch record is like looking for a needle in a haystack. For example, a recent tech transfer we've noticed, including a reference, which was a footnote of a footnote, it's buried in a safety document. The footnote detailed an explosivity issue with the dust of the API. That's pretty important to be buried. And when this issue was discovered, the CMO abandoned making the API because they weren't prepared, and the client was scrambling to find a new manufacturer. And as I'll show you, this problem would have been easily avoided with SimpliDATA. All the data that's captured here is stored properly, the right version, and it generates valuable and necessary report. And it's carried through the entire program, like I just said. So let's click on this and we'll show all the parameters we can add to this. So we talked about temperature. So the temperature we'll write in, and we'll have a unit of centigrade, and we'll just dial in here and we'll just say 50. Again, completely making up numbers. And we talked about the rate in the beginning too. So let's go to the rate and we'll just add a number there. And because we already did milliliters, we'll do milliliter per minute here. And there's your parameters for that specific line. So it's not just pull down tabs. It's not just something that Rondaxe has thought at even whiteboarding this with our clients and customers. What we've also done is put free text in here. Now, we talked about this as an exothermic reaction to where temperature is going to be important. The footnote detailed that it was explosivity and the dust of the API. So just for demo purposes here, we're going to write explosive right here in the free text. You can write anything you want. This option allows us to customize any information and instruction, as well as gives us the option to be completely flexible throughout the recipe. And once we save this line, all of the charts, tables, and critical information are updated to include that added line automatically. And with our interface, that's it. You just place the line using the pull down menus or free text, select a material, choose the quantity in units. You capture important parameters, rates, and other data by toggling more pull downs, as I showed you. And you insert your scripts to make sure it's important details included the way you want them to be detailed. And the important part of that is everyone in your license shares that information and you can all operate under the same assumptions. And once you have that recipe built, again, from importing from another recipe, from cut and pasting or copy and pasting from certain sections you want the recipe to be built on, or by typing it in like I just did, you'll have all of your information there. So when we move on to the automated fields, I want to talk briefly about the parameters. So when we talked about the parameters, I've left a couple of things blank. I left the fields here blank, which will display in the parameter table. And I've left, what I did was I switched the test and the sample previously. And that's impossible. You have to have a sample before a test. So what we're really talking about here is errors and omissions. And in manual tech transfer or doing this where it's a bunch of people sharing spreadsheets or doing this manually, it's very easy to have an omission that you would miss or an error that you might not think is an error. And not only can you catch it, but not seeing the fields here, but when you move over to the parameter table, and I put two parameters in. So in this table, you'll see both the charges here of the 3-liter with temperature as one and rate as the other. The number carries over that we put in, and here are the blank fields as far as the NOR is concerned that were left blank. So very easy to do this. We can either add the numbers here, again, just making numbers up, or we can go back to the recipe and make sure the numbers are filled in there as well, to which it would transfer over to here. So let's talk about that case study in the beginning. Remember the 10% tolerances mentioned before. This is a great way to avoid inconsistencies. We take a look at the norm par ranges. The parameter table is clear. It's an efficient way to show how the numbers line up. And in the study, I explained how there's a failure to communicate the ranges because of inaccurate transcription. That eliminates that here. With the recipe or with the parameter table, there's no inaccurate transcription. There's no handwriting. It's right here and it's saved in the right versioning, the right time, and exactly transferred over through the entire tech transfer process. So when we're looking at the importance of a parameter, we talked about this in exothermic reaction. We talked about it, the explosivity issue, excuse me. And what we really want to do is list out here what's critical and what's not. So the temperature would be critical. You add temperature too fast in an exothermic reaction, bad stuff happens. So what we really want to do is highlight exactly what we want to concentrate on first. So the reason we do that is because at Rondaxe, in our experience, we've seen multiple EBRs that give conflicting directives, especially with multiple factors in one step. For example, in the batch record, the direction might be to adjust the pH to 5.5 at 10 degrees centigrade over an hour. Well, what's the most important factor of the drive? Is it the pH, is it the temperature, or the time, or a matter of opinion? Well, it doesn't have to be. It really happens more than you think. We've seen it more than you think. But with this, you can identify which one's more important and override the ones that are less critical. And this tab keeps track of all the parameters for organization and transfer. So that's the parameter table. Now let's move on to the other omission or error that I've seen, or that I've put in here. So we have the samples and tests. And I told you we reverse the samples and tests. That might not be clear, especially in a very large recipe. But here you can ultimately see that when I added that line to 10, I separated. Line 10 then moved to line 11. So here the test step's now 9, sample step's 11. That needs to be reversed. You can easily go back into the recipe and fix that issue once you see it here very clearly. So for example, we go into test because it gives us all the tests that are done in the process. It organizes it clearly. We see where the sample's taken, where the test does everything, where it looks correct, where there's an error, where we can see everything easily. And again, I purposely put in that sample in 11, but tested at 9. And what we're trying to show is errors are easy to come by. But with this, it's very easy to find and very easy to take out. So we'll move on to the process flow diagram. And this is interesting as far as my experience is concerned, because when we see tech transfers, sometimes this isn't done at all. And if it's done manually. And it's a bird's eye view of the process that's automatically generated from the recipe. So the parameter table, the test, the PFD, everything else is automatically generated using the information from the recipe. And what this is a visual representation of the overall process. It's hard to visualize the process when you're just reading a batch record. And again, automatically generated from the recipe, where we've seen in the past this has been manually constructed and errors and omissions throughout. So scrolling through this PFD, we can see that every train is complete. In this field, you can click on individual trains up top here. So we'll go to the phosphate buffer prep, and that's a side train 1. Train 2 is a sodium phosphate wash. And we can click back to the main train. So the side trains keep track of where the product joins the main train. The main train looks great too. We can also see where the IPCs are, right here and right here. And we can show this that the feedback loops are correct, involving the tests makes sense. This shows that the process is complete, and once again, automatically generated, so you don't have to worry about this from the recipe. Well, why is this field important? Why is it important to have this? Well, now you can see and visualize where your IPCs are right away. What do you do if something fails? You can see that right away too. You can see where everything enters the main train, where they leave, and keeping track of the material flow. So speaking of materials and another automated chart, it doesn't look like much, but the real utility of the Gantt chart is planning your facility utilization. It's another great automated feature of the program, and it shows how easily Tech Transfer Tool brings over everything from the recipe build. This is not something generated manually where you could get the material entrances wrong, the time wrong, the equipment wrong. This all comes from the recipe. And again, with the error and omission correction, you'll be able to tell from any one of these charts where there's errors and omissions. So speaking of equipment, the next tool or tab we'll go to, is the equipment capacity. And the equipment capacity field keeps track of the volumes of everything added to the equipment during the process. Here we see the detail when the material is added to the equipment. Calculating Vmax, it's very critical, and it seems to be something that everyone does differently. And that's a problem when the results are incorrect or when it's just even inconsistent. We need that calculation to be consistent across the board for all of our processes. Why? Well, for safety, for regulatory purposes, and for good practice. Having it automated makes it painless and totally consistent. We've seen too many times inconsistencies, and that could cost a lot of money. It doesn't get any better than automating this, and it's all captured right here in the equipment capacity. When we're talking about automation, the consolidated BOM, the step BOM, and the process route, batch plan, and campaign plan, we will not dive into today. What we want to encourage you to do is get one-on-one demos with us. We can actually take a look at what your processes are, take a look at how your tech transfer has been in the past, and really work with you as far as letting this tool be utilized and the benefits behind it so that you can have a clean and efficient tech transfer using this. So let's take a look at the end result here. Once we have everything tabulated, which again, all it is really the recipe, and if you import or copy and paste, there's really not a lot of manual heavy lifting here. But once we have this all complete, and we want to take a look at it or share it in a familiar format, we simply export it. And this can go to a spreadsheet, a PDF, something that is familiar that we can look at that again, doesn't need to be manipulated. All the fields down here below are captured and brought over so that we can share this, we can take a look. And if you're more familiar with spreadsheets, you can look for errors and omissions with the spreadsheet rather than looking with the tool. For all of you who are Excel junkies, I do realize that these little green arrows are errors. That has nothing to do with the software. That is me playing around with it and creating those numbers. Hence, these are going to have errors to them. Now, for the omission, I highlighted this area right here. What we have here is a great way to see where we have missed something. So there's a time cycle we missed right here. So it's going to show a blank. We can either add it to the spreadsheet here, go back into the program and add it to wherever it's missing in the program, and then have it here. Errors and omissions and finding them and eliminating them are key. And that's what this software does. It's really easy to miss small details like that when you're doing this manually. And again, we've seen it. We're paid as consultants to come in here and solve those issues. It can cost a lot of money to do that. Stop it before it starts and easily catch that here. The last thing I'll say before we end this demo is there are companies out there that have a large footprint that do very good jobs with ERP softwares or large software or things like that. What we've decided to do is whiteboard this with our clients and ask exactly what they want. It is a zero footprint, web-based application that you do not have to rewrite your system for. You do not have to rewrite your infrastructure for. You simply tackle the problem at hand. We look forward to hearing from you. Thank you for being on this webinar. And please reach out to me for individual demos, and we will be right back in touch with you to show you everything within the tool. Thanks very much. Enjoyed this, and we'll see you soon.